U.S. bishops, your papal nuncio claims you don't know the real roots of the Synod on Synodality. So this Rome Dispatch is for you. Join us with the latest from the Eternal City. Church Milton's pinch hit Rome correspondent, Dr. William Mahoney. William, the Apostolic Nuncio to the United States, Cardinal Christophe Pierre, is chiding the U.S. bishops for their apparent ignorance on the true origins of synodality. But his claim is far cry from what Pope Francis is claiming. What's going on and who's telling the truth?
Those are two questions. I'll answer the first one, and I'll let the audience decide the second one. The first question is that America Magazine recently published an interview with Cardinal Pierre in which he said that he was literally shocked, his own word, shocked, that the U.S. bishops didn't know that the whole return to synodality was, this idea of synodality was rooted in Latin America over the last couple of decades. Of course, that leaves us now, we're shocked because this seems to contradict what the Pope is saying about the Synod, saying that it's a return to, that this was it was the case in the ancient church and that they preserved it in the East but not in the West. So
okay, we got information overload here. Up until now, Pope Francis, like you're saying, the latest Synod and the latest Synod of Bishops have been maintaining that the synodality is all rooted back in the ancient church, lost in the West but preserved more or less by the Eastern Orthodox Church. Is that correct?
That's correct. They've been saying this for a while. This has been coming out of the Vatican for at least several months now. And I have a quote here from Pope Francis himself. So I'm just going to let him say it in his own words. He was recently on Rai. It's a public radio and public television in Italy. He was recently on there, and he said, and I'm quoting, quote, "I believe that we have arrived precisely at that exercise of synodality that St. Paul VI wanted at the end of the Second Vatican Council, because he realized that the Western Church had lost the synodal dimension that the Eastern Church has instead," end quote. And that is the narrative that he supports and that's been coming out of the Vatican for the last couple of months.
Okay, now, but that narrative actually was shot down by an Eastern Orthodox prelate at this recent synod itself, correct?
That's correct. The Metropolitan of Pisidia, Job Getcha, difficult name for me. Anyway, he said that this isn't exactly right, and the way that that the Eastern Church has a synod is not anything like the way they have it here now. Because first of all, it only involves bishops; it doesn't involve the laity, and it's not like they're just sitting around discussing things. It's not consultative; it's deliberative. So they're there to make decisions on certain matters. It's not like they're sitting around thinking, "Hey, Susan from the parish council, do you think we should bless gay couples to rebrand ourselves?" I mean, this isn't what's happening at all in the East, so.
Yeah, I think a Rome Dispatch long about October 10th or so, we delved into that. And Dr. Jules Gomez, our Rome correspondent there, he actually met with other Eastern experts on, Eastern church affairs and history, and they were saying the same thing that the Greek Orthodox prelate was saying. So, okay, so the Pope's version that synodality was a replication of what was done in the Eastern Church doesn't seem to hold water, at least according to some experts on the Eastern Church. But now we have another story completely altogether from the papal nuncio to the U.S. He's got a whole different narrative here now, right?
That's correct. And in the interview I referenced earlier in America, he talks very specifically about how this came from Latin America specifically, and he refers to 2007, in which there was an Episcopal Conference of Latin America and the Caribbean, where they actually discussed this and this synodality, and the document that was written up after it, which is 165 pages, guess who was in charge of that document? And that was Cardinal Jorge Bergoglio, who is now Pope Francis. So that's the story he's telling.
Okay, so now I got a long title here. This is what I guess you're referring to here, the fifth conference of CELAM, the Episcopal Conference of Latin America and the Caribbean, as you were saying. They met in Aparecida, Brazil. So this document they talked to, the 165-page document, they call it the Aparecida document. And that, like you said, was, even Christophe Pierre says that Pope Francis was heading that commission that wrote that. So now Cardinal Pierre says the U.S. bishops are completely clueless about this event. and how, even though it was less than 20 years ago, and how what's happening during the Francis pontificate goes back to that era of time and even this event, correct?
That's correct. And you know what? I'm just going to put it in his own words. I'll let him tell you. I pulled out a quote here. So this is him. So this is from the recent America interview. He's referring back to 2016. Back in 2016, he says, "I was astounded that many of the bishops didn't know what had happened in Aparecida. They did not know that Evangelii Gaudium, the first document of Pope Francis, was rooted in Aparecida. They had not seen what had happened in their own continent in South America. This is very serious because what has happened was not banal. It was the beginning of what we live today." And that's the end of the quote. So
now we have Christophe Pierre being very specific, the Aparecida, that conference that took place. And that conference where Pope Francis actually was tapped as a cardinal to write that 165-page document. And he's saying all that's going on today, the synodality specifically, and Pope's first document actually is rooted back to that time. So setting aside the U.S. bishops for a minute, did anyone else in the church see the connection between, synodality and this conference in Brazil?
Yeah, absolutely. And one of them was, for example, the German prelate, Walter Brandmüller, right? Walter Brandmüller. And we know him well because he's done not one but two dubia with Cardinal Burke. With the first one about whether or not the divorced can receive communion, and then the second one was about whether or not you could bless homosexual couples and other matters. So we know him well. But he said that too, and he noted right away the connection between the two, and he was aware of that. And then in 2019 with the Amazon Synod, he realized that the Amazon Synod was, I guess you could say, the first run of this synodality idea.
So did Cardinal Brandmüller, seeing that connection, did he have a positive view of the South American roots of synodality?
No, he did not. He's very orthodox. He's a very orthodox prelate. He did not. Let me see. I pulled out some. I like it if he can say it in his own words. So he said that this it can only be understood as a spectacular break with previous history. And then he added in another place, moreover, this quasi-absolutizing of Aparecida also raises the question of the Latin American understanding of ecclesial communion on the universal level, end quote. So, no, he saw it as very highly problematic.
So we have, You've got Brandmüller there and Christophe Pierre both saying, hey, on both sides of the pond, and Christophe Pierre being down there. If Cardinal Christophe Pierre, who spent 20 years in South America, and also the Europe's cardinal, Germany, Cardinal Walter Brandmüller, both see clearly that the roots of synodality date back to fairly recent events in South America, where the communist-backed liberation theology, by the way, took hold, and directly to events that directly involve Cardinal Jorge Bergoglio. The question is, why doesn't Pope Francis see that connection as well? And if he does see it, why isn't he saying anything about it? Now, before closing out today, due to prior engagements, Rome Dispatch will not be publishing tomorrow or on Wednesday, but we will resume regular programming on Thursday. William, thank you so much for that rather intriguing story and this insightful analysis.
You're welcome.
Thanks again for watching today's episode of Rome Dispatch. This show is brought to you by donors like Real Estate for Life. If you're looking to buy or sell a home and want to support our mission, visit realestateforlife.org. Again, that's realestateforlife.org. Be sure to tell them Church Militant sent you. God bless.